Chapter 30. Light Rider. Names. They're how we identify ourselves. They're the first step in getting to know each other. Some people believe that names, which are given to us, determine our personality. My name isn't Lucy. It's just a nickname. Weird, right? Most of the time, nicknames are a shorter version of your real name, like Chris for Christopher or Liz for Elizabeth. Sometimes they're just words that for some reason are associated with you. Shorty, Tank, Casper, you get it. It's not common that someone's nickname is just another name entirely, but mine is. My nickname is Lucy. My mom gave it to me when I was just a kid. She called me Lucy more than she called me by my real name. So one day I asked her why. I don't know, she said. You just look like a Lucy. So why didn't you name me that? I don't know, but I should have. So there you have it. I found the answer to the ultimate question. Who am I? I'm a Lucy. I'm the person you've come to know through the pages of this book. I'm the person you know as Lucy Layne. The name Lucy, it means light. I like that. I never knew that before. I just looked it up as I was writing this. Lane, as a name, means a path or a roadway. So maybe I'm the girl who can light your path to wherever it is that you need to go. Maybe not. That's not my whole identity. As a word, Lane means to hold back, to conceal, to disguise. It means to refrain from telling something. How fitting. I don't think I could have picked a better pen name even if I had known all the meanings and definitions beforehand. Lucy. It means light, to reveal. Lane. It means to disguise, to conceal. That's me. I'm just a girl with a dead mom who wants to share her story. So I hope you understand that by the time you've finished this book, I've told you all I can. That there are parts of my story that are meant only for me. And amongst those things is my real name. That doesn't mean you don't know me, though. Different people know me in different ways. My identities, they change. The person who I am to you depends on where and when we met. I am any and all of these things, and sometimes more. Just based on the variations of my name, I'm a woman on her own, alone. I'm the writer. I'm beloved. I'm also the girl who my mom knew as the light rider. I always thought it was strange how she just gave me a new name, a new identity. But these changes take place whether we rename, nickname, or ignore them. My mom's story is similar to mine. She was born with a name, but throughout her life, it changed. She loved Biddo honeys. You know, the candies? So her daddy called her that. To him, it meant an angel, daddy's little girl. The rest of our family knew her as Norma. It means a rule or pattern. It makes sense since she was the glue that held them together. The one who wasn't afraid to tell her brothers and sisters to shut the fuck up when they were fighting with each other. Most of her friends knew her that way too, as Norma. My sister and I knew her as Mom, something that exercises protective care over something else. Mom was synonymous with her middle name, Lee, which refers to a shelter. A person named Lee is said to be a healer. My mom was so many things to so many people: a daughter, a sister, a friend, a lover, a miracle, a mother. She was a cancer factory. She was a paycheck to several doctors, but rarely a patient. She was alive for 51 years, and that whole time she was dying. She was a fighter. I know exactly why her name was stamped on the bottom of our Thanksgiving Day angels. Because my mom, she was heavenly. She was angelic. You may only know her as words on a page. You may, however, know her as something or someone else. My mom was many different things. But most of all, she was beautiful. Breathtakingly beautiful. And her name? It was Naomi.
Welcome back to the second annual Author Fair hosted by Rochester Writers and the Rochester Hills Public Library. My name is Michael Dwyer. Also online with us is Tiffany from the library. Hi, Tiffany.
Oh, how are you?
And our author for this segment is Lucy Layne. Hi, Lucy. Good to see you.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you here. And we just got done watching your video about names and where you're at and how this has brought you to your writing career. Could you tell us a little bit more about where you came from and where you're headed with the branding of Lucy Layne?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of two sort of separate occasions in my life, for lack of a better word, maybe milestones, but I sort of don't remember a time where I didn't want to be a writer. But I very specifically did not want to be an author. So like I said, I was young. I grew up watching my dad, who's an immigrant, read the newspaper every day. And it was kind of like his little tradition. He sat on the same spot on the couch. He read the newspaper every day. He ate an orange. He'd peel the orange. And when he was done with the newspaper, he'd wrap everything up and put it back in the bag and throw it away. So, so journalism was really important to me throughout my life because I saw that it was important to my dad, and I saw how much he learned just by reading the paper. So journalism was always the way that I wanted to go. And because I think everybody kind of thinks go big or go home, when people know that I wanted to be a writer, their first response was always, you should write a book. And I just didn't want to, it wasn't something that was a goal of mine then. It wasn't really a plan. I didn't think that I was a long story kind of writer. I thought I was a short story kind of writer. So I remember the day that I decided that I wanted to write a book. And what happened was my sister was working for a company and she was a graphic designer, and the guy that she was working for was publishing his 7th book and he needed an editor. So I got hired as a freelance position to edit this book. And as I was editing it, I realized I could write a book. Why don't I try? So I put it into a sort of perspective where thinking about writing a book seems like this huge task that really, I guess, only people think you're like a superhuman if you do it, So I thought if I only wrote 1 page a day for a year, I would have a 365 page book. And that's a pretty long book. And realistically, I know that there are going to be days I'm too busy or I don't feel good or I'm just not in the mood to write. So even if I took a third of the year off, I would still have a book that was over 200 pages. So I kind of stuck to that, and I decided when I had free time, I would always just try to write. And a lot of what I wrote for this book didn't make it into the book, because you don't just write great things with every time that you pick up a pen. But it was all part of the process, and I learned a lot from it. And not just in terms of writing a book, but just in the way to sort of approach life when something seems sort of impossible, and how you can overcome it. I realized that that kind of breaking it down into smaller portions and holding yourself accountable for doing that makes it possible. So it's really kind of made me try a lot more things. And I think it was a good process to go through, because if for people who have read my book or are going to read the book, um, I might say a lot of things in there that people don't typically say, or feel like they shouldn't say. But my whole point in writing the book is, I think that the way that we deal with people who are dealing with death is we try to snuff it out. Um, we try to cover it up and make it okay, and it's not okay for a lot of people, and it's good to just kind of get those thoughts and those feelings out. And it was a real growing experience for me.
I like your approach. It's very much like a journalistic approach where you've just segmented these pieces together. You do one page a day, put it together, review those sections. It's a journalistic approach, I think, to writing the book. Um, and the name, Dead Mom Disease, and I know this comes from um, your relationship with your mom and her, I'm guessing, untimely passing. Can you tell us more about that and how it became the book?
Yeah, so the title, I kind of explain it a little bit in the first chapter, but really what happened was, I don't even remember what the story was. My sister and I were talking on the phone, and I don't know if something happened to me or if something happened to her, but we were talking about, one of the situations that we had with one of our friends where it was very awkward for them. Because when we would bring up stories about my mom, like I said, it's, people try to snuff it out. So they think that because my mom is dead, every time I'm talking about her, it's really hurtful, or it's painful, or hard. And there's situations where you can't control, there's things that remind you of people, and you can't control the whole world to make sure that nowhere that you ever go is going to play this song, or nobody is ever going to show this movie in front of you or something because it reminds you of your mom who happens to be dead. But those things happen. And again, I think it's nice to be able to talk about the memories that you have with people and sort of, keep them alive, like people say, but that makes people uncomfortable. So they don't like talking about it, especially if you're talking about parts of the experience that were sad. So we said, we kept exchanging stories like this over time. It wasn't right after our mom died. It was actually like a few years after she died. And we had so many of these experiences that we were like, it's like we have a disease, like people are afraid to be around us, to talk about this thing like it's a disease that we're experiencing. And we just said it was, like we have dead mom disease. That's what we came up with. And it just sort of stuck with us over time. It's just like sometimes you might come up with a nickname for someone in the moment, but you never call them that again. But this idea of dead mom disease just kept coming back to us and coming back to us. And I actually wrote the first couple chapters of the book in college for an assignment. We had a choice between a couple of different ways that we could write our final paper. And one of them was to write the first couple of chapters from but like a autobiographical book, and you could write what would be the first couple chapters of that book. And so I wrote like I think 3 chapters for that, maybe 4. And I held on to those chapters for years and years and years before I ever actually went back to them and then developed it into the book.
Tiffany, do you have a question?
Well, I'm always interested to know how writers start writing. And you mentioned about your dad reading the newspaper, which I think is a great story. It's a great inspiration that as a child you noticed how important reading and the written word were to your dad. In writing the book, what sort of response has your family had, to your words and into what you've had to say?
Well, my dad didn't read the book, so he doesn't like it that I swear, and I swear in the book, and he didn't read it. He read like a few pages, so he's really proud of me that I did it though. Like he thinks it's really cool, and he loves telling people about it. He gets really excited every time I give him some sort of update on anything that's going on with it, but my sister was sort of part of the writing process for me because I did, I guess, decide in the beginning I was going to write a book, and I did think about how I was going to break it down, but I didn't plan everything out. It's not like I had an outline and like, all right, here's the story, and I'm going to put that in this chapter, and then this happened. I didn't do it like that. I kind of just whatever inspired me. Like I said, sometimes you're just walking down the street and you see something that sparks a memory for you. So something happened to inspire me in the moment and I was able to sit down and write it down. I did. And if I didn't have the time in the beginning, it happened a few times where I was like, oh, maybe I was at work and like whatever came to my mind, I think that would be a really good story for my book. But later when I went to sit down and write it, I forgot what the idea was. So I learned the hard way that I would have to make a note. And if I was busy, if I was driving, I'd make a voice note. And if I was working, I'd just pull out my phone and use the little notepad to write down some keywords from the memory or the story or whatever it was that came to my mind. And later when I had the time to develop it, I would write the chapter. And so in the end, what I did is I printed out all the chapters and I laid them on the floor. And I also have most of the chapters have a poem at the end. Some of them have just some sort of other short piece. And so I printed all of those out. And then I found like what poem would match up well with what chapter. And I sort of stacked them. And then I almost like a puzzle, just put chapters together like, oh, this kind of really, that would make sense to go after this. And then this would make sense. And, like I said, I pulled some of the chapters out. Some of them I would have questions about. So my sister was sort of my go-to person because she also, out of anybody in the world, knows the experience that I went through more than anybody else. So we sort of put it together, both of us, that way, where we'd say, I think this fits here, or maybe we should cut this out. And then it just kind of formed itself into the book. Like it all ended up working out. Even when I had all the chapters written, I still didn't know if I was going to be able to make it a book, that still seems like something that is beyond the realm of just a normal person to be able to publish a book and have it be a story that other people want to read. But it just kind of happened that way. And so my sister loves it. I mean, she's one of my biggest fans in anything that I do. And, a lot of her friends have, because of what she says about it, a lot of her friends have bought the book or read the book. So, that's really the extent of my family. I don't talk to many of my cousins or anybody on my mom's side anymore. And most of the family on my dad's side aren't strong readers. A lot of them don't even speak English. So they know about it and they're really proud of it, but they haven't really read it.
Have you thought about having it translated into the language of your family?
No, I think if it was more focused on something to do with my dad, that would be an option. But it's about my mom, and her family isn't from Iraq. They all speak English, and they're just kind of not. I still talk to some of my cousins, but I mean, not in a close way. It's just, I think the problem is the family's so big. She was the youngest of 15 kids. So uh, half of her brothers and sisters are already having kids by the time she was born. And we have hundreds and hundreds of cousins. I don't even know all of my cousins. I just joined ancestry.com trying to figure it out, but it takes a lot of work because there's so many of them. So I have thought about doing an audiobook, but that's about the extent of that. I've thought about it. I haven't really looked up, how to go about doing it or any of that, but it's definitely in my future plans, especially because just during the pandemic, I started listening to audiobooks. I never really listened to them before, but I read and write for a living. And so sometimes it's hard in my free time to choose to sit down and read, but I still love reading and I love the stories. And there's all these books I want to know what they say. So I started listening to audiobooks and I love it. So it kind of made me think maybe I will put my book on audio.
I absolutely think that's a great idea. And maybe you could do a PG version for your dad.
Yeah, maybe. We've read him a couple chapters like over the phone. Some of them that have more stories about him in it, and he does like it. So, and I mean, I swear in front of him, he has to deal with it, but maybe I'll do a PG version for him.
When it comes to your readership, your fan base, who are your readers, and what connection, what kind of feedback do you get from them regarding the content?
Well, obviously a lot of my friends were really supportive when I first announced that I published the book. So I was surprised at the mix of friends that actually bought the book though, versus the people who I thought would buy the book and then the people who actually did. A lot of them, not that I know everything about everyone, but I didn't really pin them down to be readers, so I was really surprised that they read the book. But one of the most common things that I've heard from people who know me, who have read the book, is that it's like sitting down and having a conversation with me. That the way that I wrote the story comes across in a very authentic way to my voice, and they feel like they're just sitting there and like they can almost hear me reading it to them. And I would agree with that because I think I wasn't trying to adapt the way that I was writing for anything. There's certain styles, like in journalism, there's a style. If you're writing an essay or a research paper, there's a style. This was my story. And so I wasn't trying to make it fit anything. And when I started doing it, like I said, I didn't even know if it would end up as a book. I didn't know if it would just be a lot of chapters that I wrote and I ended up with, all of this stuff on my computer and it never fit together and I never published it. Once I did realize that I could fit it together in a book, I waited 5 years to publish it. So I still didn't know that it would, actually be anything. So I wasn't going for any certain style. And then I do have like strangers who have read it, because I'll see reviews online or something from people who I don't know, or I have, a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and sometimes people will make comments on there. But that was pretty scary to me at first. Like it's scary to have people who reading something so personal that you put out there just because, I guess just because it is, no real reason. And then, but for strangers, you can only convey so much in writing. They don't get to know the person behind it, which sometimes I think might work out in your advantage, and sometimes I think it might work to your disadvantage. So I did go through a period of time where I was nervous and I thought, should I unpublish the book? I don't really know if I want a bunch of like the whole world to be able to read this. What did I do? Why did I publish it? And I had this little fight going on in my mind, but in the end, I just decided that, you know, I don't even know those people. So if they're saying something bad about me, it doesn't really affect my life in a negative way. And I was sort of hoping in the beginning, I know this is weird, but I was sort of hoping to get some kind of a negative review just to get it over with, because I know it's coming. You know what I mean? Nobody can produce something that everybody in the world loves. And I know that. You learn that in journalism and you learn it in other things in life, but I haven't gotten that yet. So that's good. I've only gotten good reviews, but I know there's someone out there who probably doesn't like it. And I'm not sure who those people are who are reading it, but it seems like the people who would be most drawn to it probably have lost a mother themselves, or maybe even a parent. And that isn't really who I think the whole audience is intended for. I think a lot of it is intended for just maybe even anybody who hasn't experienced a death, because it's a lot about how you treat the person who's going through it. And if you haven't went through it, or even if you have went through it, you don't know what it feels like for the other person. You don't know, you know, nobody knows what my relationship was like with my mom. I don't know what it feels like for my sister, because they had a different relationship than we did, you know? So you just can't really understand. And I think it's just important for us to learn to give permission to people to be upset, even when you think that they should be over it or that they shouldn't be that upset, you know? So it's intended for everybody, but probably the people who are drawn to it are someone who have went through a death of a person who's very close to them, if not their mother.
So you mentioned something that is very scary for writers, which is actually producing your work and publishing it and having people read it, right? So regardless of the genre, it's usually a very scary thing to put your words that come out of your mind onto paper and then have people read it. And then you seem to have a lot of different experiences in different genres with journalism and maybe more academic writing. How was the process of writing this book? And just kind of, as you said, there was really no style or structure. It's kind of like a conversation with you. Was that a kind of a freeing feeling for you to just do that? And then also on the flip side of that, what would you recommend for people to deal with that negative criticism if and when it comes?
It definitely was a freeing experience for a lot of reasons. Number one, I wasn't doing it for anybody. It wasn't, you know, I didn't have a grade depending on it, or my job, or, you know, at first when I was writing it, it was just for me. So even I didn't have to worry about other people reading it and having an opinion on it. So that felt really great. It also was surprising to me, I learned a lot when I was doing it, because it was interesting to think what sort of memories came to mind and how they related to things that I was doing today, or, you know, why I was doing those things today, where you sort of don't look at your life like that. You don't look at like, oh, well, I was 5 and this happened, and so that's probably why I'm doing this today, you know, unless you have a reason that you're going through and analyzing all of these things. So so it was interesting to me that way to learn just kind of how your childhood does travel with you throughout life and sort of shape you, whether it's to stay the way that you were or to become completely opposite based on what you realized from that. And I was really shy when I was younger, so I dealt with a lot of, I guess, fear of what people would think. I had an older sister and I thought she was super cool, and I always wanted to be doing things that I thought she would think was cool. And then, in school, it's just like for everybody, I think everybody goes through it. You're always kind of comparing yourself to people. I was unsure of myself a lot because I felt different from people. I never really, I don't think I have ever really fit into a certain kind of group or anything like that. I've always sort of been everywhere, all over the place. So I learned, I think, to not care so much over time, like anybody does as they grow and mature. You kind of realize, like, oh, I was so worried about this situation, it ended up being fine. So just by experience, you learn. But I had a car accident that I talk about in the book, and it left me with some physical like scarring, and it turned in, my body wasn't healing. And it turned into psoriasis. And then I went through this, I was 21. So it was hard for me because I had went through my life being just a typical person, like with nothing remarkable about me, except for the fact that I'm very short, which I never was self-conscious about. So now I had this physical thing wrong with me that people could see. It was on my face, it was on my head, it was on my hands. Like I couldn't cover it up completely, and I hated it. It was so hard for me. And I covered it up as much as I could. I wore long sleeves, I wore pants. I didn't, it was like very, very bad time for me in my mind. And then I don't know what happened, but I just had a moment one day where I was like, this is your life now. You have to accept it, or you're going to be miserable forever. Like you're always going to be worrying about what other people think of you. But I thought about myself, and when I see people who have something physically wrong with them, and I don't think less of them, so I thought there's other people like that. And I just kind of got comfortable with it. And once I got more comfortable with that physical insecurity, I just started to learn to be proud of myself, because if you're not, then other people don't have a reason to be. I just learned to stop caring so much. If people want to judge me for like one small fraction of who I am, it's more on them. That's more about like they're missing out on people. Maybe not me. Maybe they wouldn't prefer to have me in their life if they really knew me. But there are people that they're missing out on having in their life that they would absolutely love if they weren't judging on that one thing. And so I just slowly let go of it. And I try, I don't want to be disrespectful, and I don't want to offend people. And I want to have compassion and empathy for people, but I don't want to suppress who I am because I feel like it might bother somebody. Because no, you're bothering somebody no matter what you are. You're always annoying someone, even your friends or your family. I get annoyed with my dad and my sister. I love them. I think they're great. So you can't avoid it. And I just decided to not care. And that sounds kind of like crass, I guess, but it's not. I don't care in the fact that like I don't care about other people. It's that I don't care if people are judging me for things that I am not doing on purpose to hurt anybody, So it's hard. I don't know how other people can do that. I don't know if I would have been able to do it if I didn't go through that experience myself. Like I don't know. I think a lot of people know those things when you tell them. It doesn't matter if people are judging you, or, people are going to judge you when you don't know anyway. You can tell that to people all the time, but I don't know how to make it sink in. I don't even know how it happened for me. It's like I woke up one day and I just forced myself to do it. So it's a very great feeling though.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today, and as one of the authors for the Shop Small Saturday and Sunday. One final question, and then I'd like you to wrap it up by telling everyone where they can go to get more information and to buy your book. Is there a second book in the works?
There is actually a couple of them. So I wrote a children's book, which is also something I thought I would never do. But someone approached me about a particular story, and so I went with it. And that one is written. I am waiting for the illustrators to complete that. So unfortunately, I have no idea what that date will be, but as soon as it's ready, I will publish it. And then I'm also working on just a book of poems. So it'll be all new poems, none of them that were included in Dead Mom Disease. And I'm over halfway done with that. So I'd like to have it out by next summer. It could be sooner, My goal right now in my mind is my birthday, which is in August. So then I have a couple of other ideas for books that I would like to work on in the future. It's just like, I realize that if I'm working on all of them at once, it's going to, take me a really long time to finish one. So I'm trying to segment them and work on one at a time. I do sometimes write parts of the other books just because if something really inspiring happens to me in that moment and I know that it would be great for that book, I sort of jot it down. So I have little bits and pieces of 3 books in the works and 1 completed one waiting on those illustrations. And I will publish all of them under the same pen name. So if people follow my author page on Amazon, then they'll get alerts automatically once a new book is available. You can go to Amazon.com and search for Dead Mom Disease and buy the book there. It's available as a paperback and also on ebook, and maybe one day in the future it will be available as an audiobook. And then I also have my own website, www.iamlucylayne.com, and purchases could be made there as well. So any of those places.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that this is part of the reason why we are writers and why we become authors is to share this story, and it's a bit of therapy, but it's nice when it develops into something like a book and we can now show the world that. So Lucy Layne, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And more as the 2020 Authors Fair continues.